Okay, hi, good afternoon from Singapore, everyone. This is Rajesh Chabra, and you see on the screen my colleague Yensen Chan. So welcome to this pre-summit workshop on EcoVadis, and the topic is carbon and corruption, integrating CSR criteria into sustainability reporting. And we have our awesome team from EcoVadis to run this workshop. And I want to say a couple of words before we start. I want to welcome everyone, all of you who have signed up. And I hope to see you again tomorrow for the main summit. And I also want to say that CSR Works is EcoVadis certified partner in this region. And we'll be very happy to, if you have any questions related to EcoVadis or the team which is going to present the workshop today. And I'm going to just hand over to Yensen, who is going to moderate this session, and she will introduce you to our speakers today. So enjoy this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajesh. Welcome, everyone. We are very happy to see you here in this pre-summit workshop. It is unfortunate, but we are very thankful and very proud that we can have this workshop virtually. We've got so many requests from our partners, our reporters and practitioners asking for the summit, asking for this workshop. And when we finally decide to host this, right, despite not being to do this face-to-face, we got so much support, unanimous support from all of you, from our partners, from our speakers, from clients, from friends, from all of you, from signing up. So thank you for joining us today. Now, before we commence the workshop, I would like to conduct a poll. So now may I introduce Aaron Leonard, the account executive, APAC ANZ from EcoVadis, to introduce his team. Now, Aaron cannot join us on screen, but you will be able to hear him loud and clear. Over to you, Aaron.
Thanks for the introduction, Yensen, and thanks to everyone who has joined today. We really appreciate you giving us your time. Today, my team and I will be taking a deep dive into two EcoVadis sustainability criteria. The first is carbon, followed closely by corruption. And we're also going to share some really good examples of how to embed our ratings into your reporting. And these are only two of the 21 sustainability criteria we consider when rating a supplier at EcoVadis. So we hope you find the workshop valuable, and we welcome lots of questions. We'll go to the next slide, thanks. So today's workshop will run through the following agenda items. Firstly, we'll introduce our team and some information on EcoVadis. Then we'll do a deep dive into greenhouse gas emissions, followed by a deep dive into anti-corruption. And then we have some great reporting case studies that show how EcoVadis has been embedded into company reports. And we'll finish with a Q&A session. So as Yensen said, please send through your questions and we'll make sure we've got lots of time to answer them at the end. We'll go to the next slide, please. And our panelists today include myself, Aaron Leonard. I'm the VP of Business Development within the APAC region, and I'm based in Melbourne. And joining me today is Crystal Cheng, a Senior Sustainability Analyst and Team Leader, who's based in our Hong Kong office. And also joining the panel is my colleague Dehan Ye, an account executive who is also based in Hong Kong, and she works with new prospects throughout the entire region. We'll go to the next slide, thank you. So a little bit about us. EcoVadis was founded in 2007, and we've grown quickly to become one of the world's most trusted provider of sustainability ratings. And as you can see on the screen, we've got a truly global presence with our headquarters in Paris, France, and that's where the business kicked off 13 years ago. And in region, our main hub is in Hong Kong, with offices in Tokyo and Melbourne as well. We have over 650 employees and growing fast from over 50 nationalities. And as we speak, we speak over 21 languages as a combined team. So we're very, very diverse. And the last thing I wanted to point out on this slide is the significant investment of $200 million USD that we received from CVC in 2020, and the fact that we're also backed by Bain & Company as well. And I think that just reinforces the future development and growth, not only of our company, but also of sustainability initiatives and sustainability in general. And we'll go to the next slide. Thanks, Deha. And finally, for me, before I hand off to Crystal, who will start the deep dives and the really interesting part of this presentation, I just wanted to share this slide to show how tens and thousands of companies and more than 450 multinational buying companies partner with us at EcoVadis to collaborate on sustainability within a common platform, a universal scorecard and rating, and also performance improvement tools. And while some rating agencies focus only on large or publicly listed companies, EcoVadis rates everyone, and 70% of the 65,000 companies rated by EcoVadis are SMEs. And that probably mirrors the reality of your own supply bases. So I hope that resonates. So from me, thank you for listening. I'll now hand over to Crystal, who will take you through the carbon and corruption deep dives.
Thank you, Aaron, for the introduction. So I also thank you, CSR Works, for the invitation. This is Crystal, Senior Analyst at EcoVadis. Nice to be here with you all at this pre-summit workshop. Today we have the opportunity to share two important topics with you, greenhouse gas emissions and anti-corruption. So both are important topics. We'll be looking into the reporting requirements, how do reporting practitioners prepare the disclosures, and we'll be sharing our experience in helping companies to track sustainability metrics. So speaking on behalf of EcoVadis, we assess various sustainability topics of companies. Sorry?
Crystal, sorry. The voice is not very clear.
Okay, yeah.
Would you be able to speak louder?
Okay.
Thank you.
This slide shows the 21 CSR criteria EcoVadis is assessing. As mentioned by Aaron, greenhouse gas emissions and anti-corruption are in the EcoVadis methodology. And later we'll be seeing more examples of how some metrics, how EcoVadis requests these metrics and information from the assessed company and how they are relevant to GRI disclosures. Sorry, I'll just turn on. Sorry, the automatic lighting. Switching off energy efficiency. Okay, so next slide, please.
Crystal?
Yeah.
Crystal,
sorry.
may I request that you speak louder or closer to your mic? Then we can hear you better.
Okay, no problem. Is this better?
Yeah. The closer you
Okay.
are, I think the louder your voice is. Thanks.
Okay. So climate change, greenhouse gas emissions is not a new topic to us. The Paris Agreement goal is to limit the increase in global average temperature to 1.5 degrees above the pre-industrial levels. So it's putting pressure on business leaders to act accordingly and be part of the solution. And in terms of reporting requirements, we see more and more initiatives such as the or frameworks such as the Global Greenhouse Gas Protocol, CDP, and Science-Based Target Initiatives, and of course, GRI as well, setting the framework and expectations clear for the business community. Next slide, please. Yet, based on the assessment completed by EcoVadis and the latest insights gained from the results, globally, only around 15% of suppliers on the EcoVadis database are reporting to the reporting on greenhouse gas emissions, and this represents a huge gap between what is needed to achieve 1.5 degree scenario and the actual practices put in place by companies. And every day we see more and more news from the scientific community saying business leaders and governments really need to speed up and catch up with the much needed progress. So reporting is crucial to driving progress because there's this saying, you cannot improve what you don't measure, which is true when we look at GHG management practices. The best practices nowadays, as put forward by Science-Based Target Initiative, you have to first set the target for your own company in line with climate science. And of course, we'll have to report report on the emissions to make sure you're making progress towards the targets. So we'll say every sustainability reporting practitioners here today plays an important role in making the much needed progress. Next slide, please. So for today, we'll be taking a closer look into GHG emissions and also anti-corruption. And we first started with greenhouse gas emissions. We'll be taking GRI as the key reference for our discussions. But of course, this is not the only reporting framework out there. It's to facilitate our discussion. So looking at GRI, the minimum requirement is to include management disclosures and at least one topic specific disclosure of all material topics defined in order to be claiming to be in line with, in accordance with the core option of GRI standards. So for GRI, the greenhouse gas emissions is categorized under topic emissions. So under which you can see on the slide relevant disclosures, for example, scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, and other relevant disclosures. For reporting practitioners, it's important to define the physical scope and operational scope of the emissions. So I believe a lot of us are familiar with the definitions, but just to recap, scope 1 emissions are the ones from activities of an organization or things that are directly under their scope, their control, including fuel emissions on-site, such as gas boiler, for example, and physical and chemical processing, transport and mobile combustion, and fugitive emissions on site. While scope 2, it covers indirect emissions from energy purchased or consumed by the organization. Emissions are generated during the production of energy. Actually, it's outside of the physical scope of the reporting company, but since the energy is ultimately consumed by the reporting organization. So in terms of GHG accounting practices, a reporting organization needs to consider the emission in their scope 2 emissions. While lastly, for scope 3, it refers to all other indirect emissions from other upstream and downstream activities of the organization, occurring from sources that the company does not directly own or control. For example, upstream and downstream emissions such as business travels and procurement of goods and services, the carbon embedded in these purchased goods and services. And these, surprisingly, actually, these represents usually the greatest share of the overall carbon footprint if you look at scope 1, 2, and 3 in total. One last point on the slide is that if we look at a typical data collection process, because we ultimately today is about reporting, and if we look at the data collection or reporting process, scope 1 and 2 greenhouse gas emissions, they are usually closely related to internal processes. For example, you will collect fuel purchase records or electricity bills or refrigerant replacement records, for example, from corresponding departments within your organization. While for scope 3, depending on the emission categories, as it has to do with upstream and downstream emissions, it's more likely that we'll have to work with vendors and business partners to collect the data.
Crystal?
Yes?
Yeah, can I request that you continue to keep your voice loud?
Yeah.
Because at certain points, you know, you may have dropped this. Yeah,
okay.
Thanks.
Hope the connection is okay. Next slide, please. So here we'll look at a few steps, key steps, or we'll take a few steps of the reporting scope 1 and 2 emissions as an example and walk you through the process. As for the calculation approach, we see that emissions are mostly calculated using activity data and emission factors. So just for those who may not be familiar with the process, GHG emissions are not usually, in most of the cases, it's not monitored on site. It's not an emission monitoring, just like what you would do with VOCs or NOx and SOx, those air pollutants. While greenhouse gas emissions is not usually not monitored directly, but you will calculate it using some conversion factors and your activity data. And here we'll have a few examples here. Let's say we have the fuel purchase record. The reporting practitioner will compile the total amount of fuel purchased during the reporting period. And then you will multiply the total fuel purchased by the fuel emission factor. And the same goes for other emission categories such as electricity and road transport. And to arrive at the emissions figures, we will have to, first you have to have the activity data, whether it is fuel consumption, electricity consumption. You will have to collect data from corresponding stakeholders. And as a practical tip here, to make the data collection process better, is that the reporting person or the responsible personnel really has to have the resources or the right approach to engage the key stakeholders. So instead of just sending out the spreadsheet and ask the person to fill it out for you, fill out the data for you, it will be much, much better. I believe a lot of us will agree. It will be more efficient to actually engage the person to understand their existing data process and explain your data requirements to them. And even you can adapt your data collection method accordingly. So just to make sure the data collection is smooth and also the accuracy of the data collected. And finally, as for the emissions factors, you can mostly you can find them online in a lot of guidelines, depending on the exact category, but most of them are available. But if not, if you're facing a particular emission category that is more special, then you may need to rely on commercial database. More and more research and resources are available nowadays, and some local governments also gather emission factors for their businesses to facilitate GHG emissions reporting. So if you're sort of having difficulties with gathering emission factors, it's a good idea to check out what your local government has in place. Maybe their environmental authority will have something to offer. So this slide sums up the typical key steps of Scope 1 and 2 reporting. Next slide, please. So while Scope 3 emissions reporting are similar but slightly different from Scope 1 and 2 reporting, and here we'll be highlighting two of the more unique steps to Scope 3 emissions reporting for your reference. First of all, Scope 3 emissions reporting, it requires or it's recommended that the reporting person takes a takes a step to screen the Scope 3 emissions in upfront. This is recommended by the GHG protocol because when compared to Scope 1 and 2 emissions, where the sources are well defined and usually within the company's control, Scope 3 emissions itself, it's divided into 15 categories, and they are external and upstream and involves upstream and downstream activities that are out of the company's own control. So it is very important to determine which categories are expected to be most significant in size. And this will vary greatly according to the industry of the reporting entity. If this sounds very remote, or maybe as far as we understand, most companies are do not have a structured approach to Scope 3 reporting yet. But if this sounds not easy to start with, then you may consider using a Scope 3 screening tool offered by Greenhouse Gas Protocol. It is a free web-based tool especially designed for this screening process. So, and one more step that we would like to highlight here, it's the data collection step. And yeah, for Scope 3, it's slightly more complicated compared to Scope 1 and 2 as well, but usually the practitioner can consider using primary data collection method where you will reach out to a particular supplier or vendor to understand the embedded carbon in the goods and service purchased. So you need the help from a supplier, or you need a more structured approach to engage the supplier and ask for the particular data you need to calculate this part of emissions. Or you'll be also using secondary data collection method, where you will use industry average emissions factors. For example, the emissions factors per material consumed from let's say a LCA life cycle inventory database. So Greenhouse Gas Protocol on Scope 3, it is the key reference most practitioners are using, and even GRI itself is referring to this standard. So for more step-by-step guidance, you can always refer to the reference actually we put here. So Corporate Value Chain Accounting Standard. Next slide, please. So on this slide, we'll be focusing on the greenhouse gas emissions mentioned in EcoVadis methodology. And also we'll be speaking a little bit about the trend in sustainability metrics reporting. So sustainability reporting is not just relevant for large-sized corporations, but it can also be promoted to small and medium-sized companies, including companies which are suppliers of different brands. And promoting this to the small and medium-sized companies can help improve supply chain transparency and ensure we're making progress, not just in the big corporations. While some suppliers do have their own GRI or formal sustainability report, many of those do not have a formal report, but that doesn't mean they cannot do sustainability reporting. Because we see more and more buyers and even investors, they are starting their own program or platforms to track key sustainability metrics. So taking EcoVadis as an example, so clients who are using our platform, they can track KPIs such as energy consumption and Scope 1 through 3 GHG emissions on the platform. So clients can use this platform to ask suppliers for these data, and then they can use this information to further engage their suppliers and business partners in various ways. For example, tracking the GHG reduction progress, or they can select business partners based on GHG emissions performance. And regardless of the tool or platform used, companies, small, medium, or large companies, should really prepare for more accurate and comprehensive reporting on greenhouse gas emissions, partly to fulfill increasing expectations of clients and stakeholders, but more importantly, to be part of the solution to the much needed climate change mitigation effort or progress. And I hope that the last message on greenhouse gas emission is that I hope that after this workshop, you'll be once again reviewing the greenhouse gas reporting of your company, the approach or the effort, what are the approach you're taking. Is there any opportunity to expand the scope of reporting, whether it is physical scope or operational scope? Also in line with GRI reporting, there shouldn't be too many omissions in your reporting. Like the reporting should always strive to be covering as much of the scope as possible. And you can also review the opportunity to improve tools and process for data collection. And finally, the reporting and communication of these emissions and reduction efforts, whether you are only communicating internally or also reporting externally through a CSR report. So these are important questions to your team for consideration. Next slide, please. And we'll be switching to the anti-corruption topic here, which is also an important topic. Unlike GHG emissions, where corporate commitments and actions are still mostly voluntary, but for corruption, there's always, or usually there is a clear regulatory framework in place, the legal consequences of non-compliance are defined. And in a way, companies are more familiar with this topic and the common ways to avoid corruption incidents in your operations. And looking at GRI disclosures and definitions, corruption include the practices such as bribery, facilitation payments, fraud, collusion, or money laundering. And as we'll see later in the next slide, there's this, one of the disclosures will be about operations where risk assessments has been carried out. So here is just one more definition of operations. It refers to any location used by the organization, not just for production, but storage or distribution of its goods and service, or even for admin purposes, because corruption can happen mostly, or most likely actually, is around the internal maybe procurement processes or admin processes. So those are included in operations as well. Next slide, please. And here we'll be taking a closer look at the anti-corruption disclosures in GRI. So the first disclosure we're looking at is the operations assessed for risks related to corruption. And the way of looking at this is whether the company has carried out a standalone corruption risk assessment on some of their operations, or it can be anti-corruption as a risk factor in an overall corporate risk assessment. So it's not a standalone one, but it's explicitly included in your corporate risk assessment. That also works for this disclosure. And if you have such a risk assessment in place, then GRI will require you to measure the extent of this risk assessment. So let's say how many operation locations, or how many operations of your company, what's the percentage or the proportion of your operations that have been covered by such risk assessment. So that will be an important indicator here. And for communication and training about anti-corruption policies, I would say the prerequisite here is, of course, the company has already completed such communication and training on anti-corruption. So if there is no structured approach to this yet, you may want to start embedding this in your regular corporate communication, or you can even start a standalone dedicated training on anti-corruption. So making sure employees have the awareness to avoid this to happen in the organization. And once you have completed the communication or training, you need to track the outcome of this effort, because ultimately when it comes to reporting, we have to be more concrete. And for communication and training, the quantitative information on how many of the governance body or employees have been trained, or business partners trained on the topics. So these will be the KPIs concerned. And finally, on this slide will be the confirmed incidents on corruption and actions taken. So again, a prerequisite or the approach here is that you first have to look at what is the mechanism of your company to handle or to report such incident if they happen in your organization. So once you identify such mechanism, then you have to, of course, make sure the mechanism is everyone is aware of that mechanism. And if such case is brought up or reported, then you need to follow up and see and track the result of the status of each incident. So the reporting figure or the reporting KPI or the indicator here will be how many cases are there in 1 year, and what are the status? Are they still ongoing, or some of them have already been closed? So these will be the way to track this aspect. Next slide, please. And then finally, similar to GHG emissions, anti-corruption information is also tracked on the EcoVadis platform. And the way we track it is the number of confirmed corruption case during a reporting period. So the way we can use it, or our clients can use it, is that they can look into this figure reported by a particular business partner or a supplier, so that they can understand the performance level or whether this KPI has been actively tracked by the business partner as an indicator of their corruption risks. I'm finishing my part here. I will hand it over to Dihan, who will give us some practical examples of on incorporating sustainability KPIs and metrics.
Thank you very much, Crystal. Hello, everyone. This is Dihan from EcoVadis. I'm happy to be here today to share more information about what we do here. So after we learn more about the in-depth analytics that we collect through EcoVadis platform, I believe as we are in the Sustainability Reporting Summit, we are here to look for a more efficient, effective way to communicate on corporate sustainability performance. Especially in this year, companies are facing more challenges and under greater pressure about disclosing information on different kind of aspects of the corporate, including supply chain as a very critical stakeholder of all the company. So as Aaron mentioned in the very beginning, EcoVadis has been working on this field in the past 13 years, working with different sustainability professionals, procurement professionals, supply chain experts, to really try to get the level of visibility that you need, not to just manage risk, but then to get more information and clarity about what is going on in your supply chain, to tell a good story with reliable credentials. So that is why here, I would also like to share with you an EcoVadis simple scorecard. So thanks to our global 160 analysts, experts like Crystal, we assess each company on 4 different sustainability themes and 21 sustainability criteria. So first of all, of course, you will see as a rating, it's a score in a scale of 0 to 100. And then you will have 4 different breakdown themes in environmental, labor, human rights, ethics, and sustainable procurement. So other than the score, you also see, maybe a bit little here, a black little dot, which is the benchmark that you can compare this assessed company performance to the rest 65,000 assessed company on EcoVadis network. Or you can also compare this company to their own sector or different countries. So other than the score, you will also have the strengths and then the improvement area to really identify what this company has done right, which is very well, or what it has been lacking. So then they can improve further on. So among from the scorecard, you will have different kind of information and elements that you will be able to leverage on your reporting processes. So first, of course, the quantitative results, obviously the supplier score, number of supplier rated, corrective action planning to implemented, sustainability metrics, the benchmark information. The second part would be the qualitative results, which is the listed strengths and improvement area. You can identify supplier performance in different kind of criteria. The last part is the management approach. So other than getting more information about what the supplier, the company is doing on their management system, what kind of policy they have, action and result reporting, you'll also be able to demonstrate how you are approaching your supply chain as an overall management system from the due diligence part, and then you identify risk, improvement area, put them through corrective action plan to drive improvement, and then be able to track it year by year. So let's put this into context. I think it's easier to really see some real example. So the first case here would be Groupe PSA. It's a $90 billion French car manufacturer. You can see some of their brand logo on the top right. So what they have put in their reporting 2019 is that they actually assess 95 of their direct material supplier with EcoVadis, and then they are tracking their score year by year. So then they report on how many assessments they have done with a supplier. And based on their supply-based result, they can also benchmark how their score looks like when they compare to EcoVadis average score. So you can see here, the brown line is actually the supply base or PSA group. which is definitely outperforming the overall EcoVadis database. So this is something very promising. And what is more interesting is here that when reporting on environmental performance in their supply chain, they have set very concrete goals. So first of all, they have ambition by 2035 that they set a threshold for the score level that their supplier needed to reach. And then they have the breakdown target for 2019 on how much level that the supplier will need to achieve. And then they report on the result in 2019. So then they have reached the targets. And then not just reporting, okay, we have reached a 54 out of 100. They can compare that result with the EcoVadis average score, and then the sectorial average, which is 5 points above the sectorial average, and then 9 points up the global level. So this is a very promising and meaningful reporting way to really communicate with whoever watching, reading your report about what is your target. And of course, they set a target for 2020, and then we will be able to track the performance in their next report. And the last part will be Takeda. It's a leading pharmaceutical company based in Japan. I think it's very familiar to most of the audience here. So they also report their ethical sourcing and supplier risk management process, where EcoVadis take out the post-contract monitoring part. They set out the target, how many suppliers they will want to evaluate each year, and among different geographical locations. And the last part, as Crystal just shared, there are different KPIs, sustainability KPI that you will be able to monitor. So for example, it's still a bit small, but then look at this, how their supplier are actually reporting on energy consumption and greenhouse gas emission. There's already 7-something% of that. And then 38% of their supplier assessed has been a CDP respondent, and 81% of their supplier has been having the corruption policy. So having this measurable in place, that you will be able to have a clarity about what are you managing. So first of all, you get a measurable in place, and then you'll be able to set milestone, engage with those supplier performing well for further development. And if someone has not already reporting this, and then that will be the good chance for capacity building. So I think, I hope the sharing is meaningful and interesting to you. As I said, please share through the question box, or feel free to engage with Aaron or myself. Thank you very much. Now I hand it back to Jensen. Thank you.
Thank you, Dehan. Thank you, Crystal. Now we do have quite a lot of questions coming in. So if I may, let me start with questions related to SMEs. I think you have given some very good examples, but I think there are questions coming in to ask about SMEs. So we're going to answer a few questions here live. Shilin is saying, is there any tools or techniques to generate real engagement rather than just minimum levels of compliance, particularly for SMEs that do not have specific resources? Similar questions coming from Dr. Fatin, asking how can a small company assess its emissions? Is there an embedded calculator that you can provide free of charge for these companies? And what are the recommended practices for SMEs? Aaron, do you want to answer this question?
Yeah, I'll tackle this question. And hello, Shalene, out there. Good to hear from you again. Look, we use engagement as a tool, if you like, when we're dealing with SMEs. And rather than just sending out an SAQ or a questionnaire and then hoping that it comes back and it might be self-declaration, we're very heavily involved in supporting a supplier through the process, the questionnaire process, often in local language. We're giving guidance, we've got training modules, we've got great partners like CSR Works. So when someone's really stuck and they're really looking for external support, we've got a lot of, I guess, tools and engagement to take them on the journey. But the most important thing I think you'll find is that they buy into the journey. They understand the importance of sustainability and why they're being assessed. And they themselves value the scorecard and the rating so that they can benchmark themselves, and they themselves then are on that sustainability journey. But we do that through a lot of mechanisms, not so much tools, but it's deep engagement and education.
So is there a free calculator or any tools that's being embedded for SMEs to use if they come on board as an EcoVadis assessment?
Yeah. On that part, look, I'm probably not the best person to answer that, but we do. We actually have, or we've got a tool that will be coming out on the carbon front that will be assisting small businesses to measure their carbon, and we'll give them guidance on how they do that. And for the supplier, it's not set in stone because we're just about to launch that. But for the supplier, it's looking like there will be no additional cost because we're here to enable suppliers to give the right information to our buying companies. But along the way, within our platform, we do have a lot of documents that give guidance and help smaller suppliers on the journey. So if they're starting and they're quite immature, they're beginners and they need guidance, they need to understand how to develop and create a policy, we'll help them do that. And again, I will say we work extensively with partners right around the globe that can help in local language in local markets.
Thank you, Aaron. Now we have another question. This is coming from Jeannie. Jeannie is asking, it seems EcoVadis data collection is mainly based on GRI reporting standards. And nowadays, many new standards coming up in the market. So what is your data collection strategy for clients in facing with these new standards and new frameworks?
Maybe I'll take that question. Do you hear me better now? Actually, I changed maybe there's
very
problem.
Good.
Yeah, sorry, there's a problem with the audio. So we GRI is basically we took this as a reference mainly for our discussion today because it's one of the most prevailing reporting standards out there, but it's only one of the many reporting framework that we reference to, and the way we cover different aspects or set KPIs is not limited to GRI. One of the ways we ensure we're keeping up with the market development is that we will review how we ask questions or the data collection metrics by industry. So sometimes we have by close engagement with different clients in their industries, they will basically come to us and tell us, hey, for example, in pharmaceutical industry or in car manufacturing industry, what are the latest metrics they would like to look at? And through those interactions, from time to time, we take in new indicators, and then we ask new questions in the EcoVadis methodology. So one example I can share with you is that in the pharmaceutical industry, there's growing concern over pharmaceuticals in the environment. So suppliers, or manufacturers of pharmaceuticals, they are not treating pharmaceuticals remaining in the wastewater. They're not treating them well enough so that they leak into the environment, and that's a great concern. So this KPI have been incorporated based on client feedback. So that's an example.
Thank you, Crystal. Now there is another, well, we have more and more questions coming in. Okay, let me pick a few one. There is a few questions related to carbon emissions. Firstly, for scope 3 emissions, do we calculate emissions from our customers who buy products from us, or do we only cover emissions from our supplier? All right, and related to that, do you validate the emission data collected by the companies?
First, on the the types of emissions included in scope 3, mainly it's the embedded carbon in the goods and services purchased. Let's say you purchase different capital goods or other goods to be part of your operations, then you may want to expand your scope to consider those embedded carbon in those purchased goods and services. So that's the upstream category that is most popular or most relevant to most industries. And for the second question, do we evaluate the emissions we collect? Yes, we will have just part of our analysis process is to ensure the quality of data we are receiving. And of course, if we see signs of irregularity or inaccuracy, then we will have certain process in place to reject some not convincing evidence, for example.
All right, and now there is another question here. Do you still carry out on-site audits given the COVID-19 situation? Is this something that EcoVadis continue to do?
Yeah, actually, the EcoVadis assessment is largely desktop-based. We receive information from the suppliers or the rated companies, and we also conduct our own research on the company, whether there are third-party information on, let's say, environmental violation records, for example, from different databases. We'll see the actual performance of the company, but largely it is it's desktop-based. Only in very exceptional cases we will need to trigger an on-site audit, but that part, to be honest, is affected by a little bit indeed in some certain areas, and we understand it's not the best time to conduct on-site audit. So yes, in a way it's affected, but yeah, it's only a very small part of our methodology as it is designed to be desktop-based.
Maybe I can add in a little bit more information here. So EcoVadis, we have been carrying out this management system approach assessment. So other than a very compliance-driven on-site audit, so you will have a checklist, you go on-site to check everything. And of course, we know this year has been extremely difficult to do that. And so we're seeing more and more advantage that what we can bring for the procurement, the supply chain team, in order to get more information in a difficult time like this. So because EcoVadis rating assessment is desktop-based, so it's easily we can quickly scale up. For example, if you have 100,000 supplier, it's very difficult to go on-site check one by one. That's very resources costly, and then we know the situation is not allowed this year. So that is why we are trying to get the visibility and transparency as much as possible. And then you can streamline to spot really where's the risk. And then from the management system point of view, you can set up what kind of policy, what kind of action, measure, training program, and then you track on their reporting results. So that is something that we are trying to help the company to get more visibility. And of course, if in the past they have different kind of on-site audit reports, our analyst team is happy to take in as a third-party certification or different kind of reporting into the supporting document for us to come up with a score.
Thank you, Dihan, for the elaboration. Now we probably have just one more last questions. We have talked a bit about carbon emissions and the approach and the audit. There is one question related to corruption, because that's one of our focus as well. There is this, oops, I lost track of the questions. Give me a minute. All right, I'll come back to that questions. There is one more questions relating to, you have 21 CSR criteria, right, in your slides. But we only covered 2 today. That is the carbon emissions and the corruptions. Are there any specific reasons, why do you choose these 2 topics to be covered today? Yeah, perhaps Crystal can share that.
Well, I might actually speak up there because
all right.
The only reason is we debated as a team as to, and it's really difficult to understand what's material. What are the things that we should be, or the criteria that we should be talking about today? So we just chose carbon because we know carbon with science-based targets, and there's a lot of talk about carbon. We've got a broad region here in a lot of the different countries, and corruption is something that's always relevant. So we just landed on those 2 today. However, there is merit in talking about a lot more of our criteria. It's just simply what we chose today.
Related to the questions about the corruptions, there's one question from Crete. how can the company track controversies in regard to business ethics? Is this something that we can get, from the public domain? How do we go about it?
If it's the, let's say the compliance team within the company, then of course they should have a like incident tracking system, or for cases reported internally, not necessarily brought up to the court, for example, but internal cases, dispute, for example, they should have a whistleblowing procedure in the first place for cases to be reported, and that will be a good starting point. But for outsiders, let's say for clients to understand their suppliers, then also public database or court cases will also be a source of information, and that is included in our screening, in our understanding of the suppliers as well. We actively look at legal compliance database.
Yeah, so it is unlikely you get a one-stop website with all this information. There's a lot of work and research has to be done, right, to find where the information is. Now, a lot more can be said about this topic. I know we can continue for another, one day, and we cannot finish what we want to do. But all good things must come to an end. Before we part ways, maybe can I quickly get Aaron, Crystal, and Gihan, what is that one takeaway message you can have for our audience who tune in today? We have more than 120 over participants. So quickly, just one takeaway for our attendees today. Aaron, shall I start with you?
Yeah, look, I looked through the questions and I saw a lot about supplier value. So my big takeaway is there is as much in it for the supplier as there is in it for the buying company. So there's really shared value there. So your suppliers will value this journey as much as you will.
Crystal?
Yeah, for me, I will talk for carbon, because there's climate urgency. If there's one takeaway, really speed up the progress. Every year we say this is the year to be fighting climate change, and don't compromise when it comes to accuracy and comprehensiveness. Really go for better climate reporting and actions.
Thank you, Crystal. Gihan?
All right, let me quickly sum up like everyone has said today. So I think that has been a very nice discussion, and there are abundant resources out there. So don't think twice, just start taking action today.
I agree with you, Gihan. I think we should start taking actions now. So we have, thank you for all the wonderful tips and advice. We'll come to the end. Rajesh, do you want to add the last word before we end the workshop for today?
Okay, happy to have the last word here. Well, I saw some of the questions related to this presentation, so I just wanted to say that our plan is to make this entire recording available. Most likely it will be available on the EcoVadis website, and we will keep you informed, so you can watch this entire, especially those who couldn't join us today, you can do that as well. So that's what's going to happen after this. And we have the main summit tomorrow. I know many of you have signed up for that, so I look forward to welcoming you to the main summit, which you see in my background. The date is tomorrow. So I'll see you tomorrow again. And thank you for spending your time with us. Thank you to the EcoVadis team, Aaron, Gihan, Crystal, especially Crystal. It's very difficult to get the time from the analysts. So I'm very pleased to have Crystal here. They are the ones who assess your reports. They are the ones who do the real hard work behind this team when you have submitted your questionnaires and responses. So thank you, Crystal, for being with us here today. I hope this is useful, beneficial for everyone. But if you need any help related to EcoVadis assessment, we are just an email or a phone call away. Just get in touch with us, and we will try to help you. That's all, and bye for now.
All
Have
right.
a nice day.
Yep. See you tomorrow. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.